You might think of the Good Friday Agreement of 1998 as something settled. A chapter in a history book, a famous peace deal that ended decades of conflict in Northern Ireland. But the truth is, it's anything but settled. Right now, today, it's at the absolute heart of the UK's biggest political fights. It's a living document that people are still arguing over. And it's funny, because on the world stage, this agreement is treated like a rock star. It's held up as the gold standard, the blueprint for how you solve conflicts that seem impossible. But to really get why it's so controversial today, we first have to understand what this poster child was actually supposed to do in the first place. All right, let's rewind to 1998. It is so hard to overstate what a massive achievement this was. After years and years of painstaking negotiations, we're talking unionist and nationalist political parties, paramilitaries, the UK and Irish governments, this incredible agreement was finally hammered out. It was designed to be the definitive solution to a problem that seemed to have no solution.
The real genius here is its structure. Think of it like a three-legged stool. It needs all three legs to stand. Strand 1 was all about the internal politics, setting up a government where both communities had to share power, so no one side could dominate the other. Strand 2 was about building connections between North and South on the island of Ireland. And finally, Strand 3 was about managing the bigger relationship between Ireland and Great Britain. It was a really clever framework for a totally new kind of peace.
And wow, just look at the sheer ambition here. This was about way more than just, getting people to stop fighting. This promised to completely rewire the whole society. It was about ditching the old winner-takes-all mentality and building something new based on rights, equality, and crucially, respect for each other. It was a huge, transformative vision. But here's the thing about grand visions, right? Signing the paper is one thing. Actually building that new society, well, that turned out to be a much, much messier and longer process. And that promised transformation in Northern Ireland has been anything but a smooth ride. Sloth-like. That's not my word. That's what the experts who study this stuff call it. In reality, the progress has been incredibly slow. It's been this constant stop-and-start cycle of crisis, then another frantic negotiation just to get things back on track, then another crisis. And all that frustration just built up over the years. And this slide just lays out that gap between the promise and the reality so clearly. A specific Bill of Rights for Northern Ireland? Nope, still waiting on that one. Getting to the root of the poverty that fueled so much of the conflict. Well, major social problems are still a huge issue. And a stable, working government? Yeah, that's been the biggest headache of them all.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 65%. That means for roughly 2/3 of its entire existence, the government that was designed to heal all these divisions has actually been shut down, empty, and silent. This constant paralysis created a huge political vacuum, and that left the entire peace process wide open to new shocks. And believe me, the biggest shock of all was right around the corner.
So, you've got this already fragile, on-again, off-again situation, and then along comes a political earthquake that shakes the very foundations of everything, Brexit. And right at the center of the fallout is a little something called the Northern Ireland Protocol.
Now, here's the great irony. The protocol was literally created to protect the Good Friday Agreement. The whole point was to avoid a hard border on the island of Ireland, which everyone agreed would be catastrophic for the peace process. But now, the UK government argues it's doing the exact opposite.
And there it is. That's the core of the whole standoff. The argument, coming from the very top of the UK government, is that the thing designed to save the agreement has actually ended up damaging it, creating a brand new crisis that puts the whole peace at risk.
Okay, so let's dig into that claim. Is the protocol really the villain here? Is it actually wrecking the Good Friday Agreement? To figure that out, we have to look really closely at the specific parts of the agreement that are supposedly being violated.
So one of the main arguments you'll hear is about a principle called cross-community consent. The claim is the protocol doesn't have it, but here's the crucial detail everyone needs to remember. The agreement itself is really specific. This principle is a tool for the local Northern Ireland Assembly to use for big internal decisions. It was never meant to be a veto for one community over international treaties signed by the UK government.
And this is where it gets really interesting, because critics are quick to point out a bit of hypocrisy. They say that while the UK government claims this principle of consent is sacred when it comes to the protocol, it has ignored it on other massive issues. For example, Northern Ireland voted to remain in the EU, but Brexit was imposed anyway. New laws had been brought in by London while the local government was down, and there's a hugely controversial bill about the conflicts past that literally every single local party is against.
That context is pretty important here.
All right, so the other big accusation is that the protocol broke the power-sharing government, that it's the reason everything's collapsed again. But is the protocol really the cause, or is it just a convenient excuse?
Well, when you look at the situation on the ground, the sources are pretty clear. The largest party, Sinn Féin, is ready to govern. All the other parties are ready to govern. One party, the Democratic Unionist Party, is refusing to take its positions, which blocks the entire government from working because of its stance on the protocol. So it's not that power sharing itself is broken, it's that one of its key members is choosing to boycott it.
So what does this all mean? The big takeaway is that the Good Friday Agreement isn't some dusty artifact in a museum. It's a live political football, and its principles are being used as weapons in today's fights over Brexit, over sovereignty, and over the very future of Northern Ireland.
Look, it's not a story of perfect success, and it's not a story of total failure either. It was and is a massive achievement, but its journey has been messy, and a lot of its promises are still unfinished business. And it's that very imperfect, incomplete reality that makes it such a powerful and controversial symbol today.
And you know, amid all the political fighting and the high-level arguments, the sources point to something that's really easy to forget. Real, lasting change doesn't always come from politicians. It often comes from what the experts call the cumulative impact of everyday people. The community groups, the activists, the unions, who are still on the ground pushing to make those original promises of the agreement a reality.
And that really leaves us with one big final question, doesn't it? We usually think of a peace treaty as the end of a conflict. It's the finish line. But what if it's not? The whole story of the Good Friday Agreement seems to suggest that signing the deal isn't the end of the story at all. Maybe, just maybe, it's the starting gun for the longer, harder, and even more important race, the one to build a real and lasting peace.